Georgia Jaguar, independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator here, Stampin' Georgia. And I am sitting here in the dark because I want you to be able to see this cute little luminary that I made. It's one of the projects that I had my guests make at my VIP Appreciation Open House on Saturday. And I want to share with you how I did these. So I'll turn on the lights, but let's get started. So I'll show you my little luminary again. And you see that I've got, obviously, a different portion of those hometown greetings edgelets on every side. I use the church and the star as my front. I just simply had a battery operated tea light inside to illuminate it. I'll set that aside. So the first thing that you're going to want to do to get started is prepare your vellum. I'm using cardstock vellum, and because I was making multiples of these, I took my 8.5 by 11 inch sheet of cardstock vellum and cut it down to 8.25 by 11. So I kept the full length, but I cut off 1/4 of an inch, and then score at 2, 4, 6, and 8. And that leaves this little 1/2 inch flap for assembling your luminary. So then I'm take that piece of vellum. Oh, and while you're scoring this, you're going to want to be gentle with your score blade because it is cardstock vellum. It's thinner than cardstock, and you really don't want it to tear. And so my main thing was making the white marks so I could see where to make the folds. So then when you put your vellum into the softly falling embossing folder, you will put one edge along that flap, so that little 1/4 inch flap sticks out, and then it will only do 3 sides. You can go run it through a second time and do the last panel, but I decided that there has to be a back to everything, so I did not emboss the back one. And so you run that through the Big Shot, and then you get this through the magic television. And then I applied a piece of tear and tape. It's just the right width on that little 1/4 inch flap. So before we go to assemble it, it's easiest to do your folding first. So you're going to carefully score on those score lines because, again, you haven't scored it real deep. You've just made marks so you knew where to score. So I'm just going to carefully press on those. And then once you get that measure marked out, you can go ahead and take your bone folder and make a little bit deeper creases on those. And then to assemble it, what I have found to be easiest is to fold one of the flaps in so that your 1/4 inch flap for adhering with the adhesive on it. And you see, I've got more to get a hold of. Peel that off, and now I can just, because they're all scored the same, I can just fold that back on itself. Of course, easier when you're not doing it in front of a camera. There we go. And then once you get it in place where you want it, then you can make the good crease. But don't crease too hard until you know you've got it where you want it. So there I've got my little box for my luminary. Next up is to prepare my paper to do my die cutting. And so I've taken a piece of shimmery white cardstock. It's 3 1/4 wide by 6 inches. And then I'm using the multi-purpose adhesive sheets with a peel-off back. And I'm going to put that on one side of my shimmery white cardstock, and that is cut down to 3 by 6. So I do have a little bit of edge that does not have adhesive on it, but that just makes it easier to hold on to when you start doing your project. And then for positioning, I am positioning my edgelet with the church on one end, and notice I'm purposely leaving about 1/8 of an inch on one end, and the same thing on this end. It just gives me a little bit of extra length if I need it. And because this edgelet, the snowbank is going uphill, you want to just make sure and get the lines parallel and perpendicular between your houses and your church so you don't have any leaning houses in church. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that. One of the things you'll definitely want to have handy after you run it through the bake shop is your foam mat and die brush. Get rid of some of those pieces and just see how easily those edgelets pop out of the paper. Now, yes, I do have a fair amount of pieces still stuck in my die, and I can run this over to get some more of those out, but a lot of those are going to come out when I peel the backing off my adhesive sheet. So you can go ahead and leave that. So the next thing to do is to cut our edgelets out of our paper. So we're going to do that, and I cut in toward, just giving me a little extra length just in case I need it when I start wrapping it around my little luminary. Okay. So I'm going to start with the church, and I told you we left one blank, so that's going to be the back of my luminary. This one I'm going to turn it so that my snowflakes looks like it's falling heavier from the top. The other one I did the opposite. I am going to start with the church opposite the flat back, and I'm just going to figure out where my first fold is going to go. And then hang on tight and figure out where my next fold is going to go, because I want those folds to match with my little luminary box. So now once I've done that, and just kind of crease it good with your fingers after you get that, because you don't want to squish your little luminary, then peel the back off. And if there's any little pieces that's stuck, which most of them come out once you peel that off, you'll be able to tell, and you can remove those before you stick it down. So again, I'm going to go back to that corner and adhere that. And these, it is easy enough to reposition the self-adhesive sheets as long as you haven't pressed them really, really hard. And then we'll keep that going. And notice I do have a little bit of a flap there. I'm going to trim a little of that off, just because I don't need it to overlap that far. And then I'm going to take my last piece, and I know that these two houses just fit. So I'm going to cut it, just cut the length of that house down, the side of the house, all the way over, and this fold is going to go right even with that house. And then we're going to go over here, and this one will end up trimming off, but you notice the discrepancy there between that snowbank and that snowbank. And so I trimmed down my house just a little, and I didn't want that to be so different. I just kind of rounded that up to give it to be close to the length of the other one. And peel the back off of this one. Start where I left off on that corner. Follow the edge at the bottom of your luminary. So now I just finish by pressing this last side on. I can press the houses down now and the trees. So I've got them into position. And the last thing to do is to add my star. I cut a star out of the Dazzling Diamonds glimmer paper using a Thinlit. It's the tiniest one in the Starlight Thinlits. And it was the perfect star for a Christmas scene at night. So there you have it. A pretty easy and very inexpensive little luminaries. Can't you see like 3 or 4 of those on the mantle with greenery and lights behind them? Anyway, thanks so much for stopping by. I hope you will make some of these luminaries and give it a try.